How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the Soulward. I'm Bryce Newberger, and we have a follow-up video, which was very good, to our Why I Cannot Be Atheist video. Now, that was a short, it was an hour long. I really wanted the video to be shorter, but there's a lot of dense content, which is why I recommend you buy the book for $5, because it covers actually about 1/3 more content. And it's a lot more clear, a lot more concise, and you can read it. It doesn't take an hour to read. So verbalizing these things can sometimes take longer. It's not as concise. However, I did want to present the book in a little bit of an video format so people could get a good taste of it, be aware of it. And with that comes what I call the atheist tax, which is whenever you create a video on atheism, my comment section usually gets a fair number of people who are atheists, as is their allowance to be. But their gripes a lot with the videos can sometimes be, I hate the part where the Christian guy said stuff. And you're like, cool, do you have any feedback? What did you disagree with? I didn't like the part where you were a Christian. That's the part I didn't like. But but what we're going to do is I've been engaging with them in the comments. And it was my birthday when I was talking to them for the most part. I just had my birthday. And actually, it was a good birthday gift to me because I love these conversations. They're a lot of fun. And so I was happy to engage. They got really good, long, thorough responses from me. If you want to go check out that comment section, you can. However, I want to try to keep this video short. I've already wasted about 2 minutes introducing it. So let's jump into what is my video response to all of the comments. However, if you want to go to the comment section, you can see really good, written out, theoried and responded comments. They're all there where you can read it and chew on it. However, we're first going to get to what my counter argument is against all of them. And we're going to highlight what's been a really rewarding conversation for me, which is how materialistic naturalism doesn't allow metaphysics. And so what we're going to look at is atheists resist logic, not just God, but logic. How atheists resist logic to spread their religion of materialistic naturalism. And I will show you that I call it a religion. They definitely wouldn't, but you could call it a philosophy. But there is a lot of zealous, there's a bit of zealotry there where there's an axe to grind, there's a sword to be sharpened, and they love to proselytize. So they proselytize a lot, which is why they go in the video. Your religion's dumb. Join my religion of materialistic naturalism. They're proselytizing. They're evangelizing. So let me highlight the argument first and show you how it's going to play out. So my head's going to be in the way for these notes. I apologize. I didn't set up my screen where I remove my head, but I'll try to give you guys a good view of everything. So materialistic naturalism, let's define it as a worldview. And this is what I mean. Someone said you misrepresent atheists in the video, and he said he's going to film a follow-up response. I look forward to it. That's going to be awesome. But I did specify, keep in mind, when I say atheist in the video, and I did specify in the last video, I don't mean all atheists carte blanche. I mean the most common atheist these days. We're talking about Lutonin, or we're talking about, or Lewontin, we're talking about Dawkins, we're talking about these guys who are materialistic naturalists as a philosophy, as a belief system, as a worldview. And we're going to talk about materialistic naturalism, how it's supposed to be used, and how it's not something that we should demonize. It's something we should rely upon in certain circumstances, but they take it too far. So materialistic naturalism, definition as a worldview. Materialistic naturalism is the belief that everything that exists is ultimately physical, composed of matter and governed by natural laws, that nothing exists beyond the natural world. It holds that the phenomena, including consciousness, morality, and meaning, can, in principle, be explained entirely through physical processes without appealing to anything supernatural, spiritual, or immaterial. It is only physical. So the core tenets that we're going to discuss here are, and I'll define ontology and epistemology in the next section. Just let me kind of get these definitions out. This is the kind of clerical work, so we can be very specific in our terminology. More on that in a second. But the core tenets are ontological physicalism. Reality consists solely of matter, energy, and space-time. Matter, energy, and space-time. There's nothing else. It's all physical. Methodological naturalism. The scientific method is the only reliable path to knowledge. And we're going to go through the comments and show you how this is brought up time and again. And but first, I'm going to tease out why that's not a coherent worldview. Epistemic empiricism. Truth claims must be based on observable, measurable evidence. So if you can't see it, you can't touch it, you can't weigh it, it doesn't fit in a beaker, it's not real. It's empirical evidence or nothing. Causal closure. All causes are physical causes. No non-material entities influence the material world. No spirits. Now, at its truest source, that would also mean no multiverse, though we're seeing some people allow that. But in its core, no multiverse, no spirits, no extra dimensional beings who we can't perceive. And that's where they differ from other atheists who leave room for a multiverse or aliens or whatever. And denial of supernatural. There is no God, soul, or afterlife, or metaphysical mind. Again, some atheists could believe in a soul. Some could believe in a metaphysical mind without necessarily believing in a God. But materialistic naturalism as a worldview cannot allow those things. So already atheists, as you're listening, Christians, as you're listening, all of that, any other religions who are here, keep in mind, we are talking about this branch of materialistic naturalism. Do not goalpost shift as you change your definition to say, well, if you want to argue for materialistic naturalism, then argue for it. But don't conflate it with something that it isn't, right? So this is what it is. The implication of the worldview is consciousness is an emergent product of brain chemistry. Your thoughts are just chemicals. Morality is either evolutionary, which means we evolved to develop a moral system, or they're culturally constructed, which means that we learned that maybe survival of the fittest wasn't the best moral, and culture created a different, and that also led to religion. Purpose is not inherent, but subjectively created. It's on you to make meaning of your life. But the reality is we are cosmically insignificant. We are just here, and it is a lot of hubris and pride and arrogance to think that your life could have any meaning other than what you assign to it. The universe has no ultimate reason for existing. It just is, okay? So materialistic naturalism, that's what it is as a worldview, okay? Now, first I want to clarify on physics versus metaphysics, and this is really important because we don't want to confuse the two, okay? So physics studies how things happen, deals with observable, measurable phenomena within space-time, uses tools like experimentation, mathematics, and the scientific method. Example, what causes objects to fall? Gravity, mass, etc. Metaphysics, however, asks why anything exists at all. It deals with being, causality, meaning, and purpose, the foundations beneath science. And there's actually a commenter we're going to get into who says that I'm divorcing philosophy from science, and he talks about how intertwined they are. And actually, we agree. And my issue with materialistic naturalists is that they deny metaphysics, they deny philosophy, and try to remove science from philosophy, and they're actually very closely linked. So it uses logic, reason, and philosophy to examine assumptions science cannot test. Example, why does anything exist, including gravity? So physics can answer what gravity, but it cannot answer why gravity, or why we even have gravity, right? So a common mistake is science can explain everything. That's actually a metaphysical claim, not a scientific one. You cannot scientifically prove that science explains everything. That is basically a truth claim that you're making. That is not a scientific claim. It's a metaphysical claim. It assumes truths outside science to support science itself. So this is not denying science. It's to say that science can explain everything is inherently not a scientific claim. So it becomes self-refuting. We'll get into the weeds on that. Why it matters. Materialistic naturalism tries to answer metaphysical questions using physical tools. That's like using a telescope to listen to music. Wrong tool, wrong category. All right. So let's get into my argument. Now, my attempt here was to steelman materialistic naturalism, which is I want to hear them. So you're saying, and I want to get the clearest, not strawmanned, most concise. So I'm actually going to use very clinical language here, and then I'm going to give a more simplified version. But for the sake of someone saying you're misrepresenting us, I'm going to use very specific language so we can use that as a basis to talk. But then sometimes being very specific and purposeful in our language can actually make the conversation more confusing because you're using just big words. But I want to promise you, I'm not using them just to use big words. I'm using them so when you push my definition, I can point back to a word that is very weighty and well-defined so there can be no miscommunication on what I'm saying. The argument is this: given a closed material universe, all ontology, epistemology, and teleology must emerge entirely from within the system. Okay, so this is what I believe the materialistic naturalist argument is to be. And I spent a long time trying to refine this statement to be as clear as possible. So every word in there was chosen. Literally, I hummed and hawed over every word that I should put in there. Given means accepting the premise for the sake of argument without necessarily affirming its truth to examine its logical implications. So what I'm saying is, given a closed material universe, it's saying for the sake of this argument, we are going to entertain the idea that there is a closed material universe. If you can't accept that premise, you can't even debate the topic. So my own father once said, "Why would I even want to entertain a world without God?" Love you, Dad. But if you can't even entertain it, then you can't have the conversation with the atheist. So we need to learn how to speak the language. And so that's why I'm going to say, given, just accept it for the hypothetical sake of argument that there is only a closed material universe. What does that mean? It means all ontology. That is the study of being, what exists and how it comes into existence. All epistemology, that is the study of knowledge, how we know what we know. And teleology, that is the study of purpose, what direction or intent, if any, reality holds. And so if something has a purpose, all ontology has to emerge within the system. And so a teleological claim would say, what is the purpose of science, right? To know things and to study things. And so that's a teleological claim of purpose, the reason of of science. And then you can only know what science says. That's epistemology. That's an epistemological claim of what the use of science is for the sake of knowledge. Okay, so to avoid all the big words, here's a more simplified logical restatement, but I don't want to lose the very specific language that I've put in here, okay? So, but I'm going to simplify it for those who are kind of getting lost in the weeds with those words. If the universe is a closed material system, then all being must arise from non-being through purely impersonal material processes, okay? So if the universe is a closed material system, then existence, knowledge, and purpose must all self-originate from non-rational, non-conscious mechanisms, okay? So that's saying if it's not a rational system, then you have to get existence, knowledge, purpose, all of that from a non-rational system, non-conscious system, mechanisms, not personality, okay? So that's materialistic naturalism. If you're an atheist and you don't believe in God, but you do believe, but you're moving away from these statements, then these are metaphysical claims, and you're saying that there is something outside of science that should be entertained, okay? And that would be a more reasonable claim. That's going to be my claim for the video. So Here is my refutation. Okay, so I've tried to steelman their argument. Which is to say that given a closed material universe, all ontology, epistemology, and teleology must emerge entirely from within the system itself. Okay, so that is the best steelman I can do. I'm not trying to straw man. I'm trying to paint the argument in blanket terms and just say this is what they're saying, okay? So here's my resistance to it, my refutation. A dispersonal material system, by definition, lacks will, intentionality, or causal agency. As such, it cannot bring itself from non-being, since this would require it to act before it exists. a violation of the law of non-contradiction and causality. Okay, we're going to break down that argument a little bit closer as we go down. So, dispersonal, why does that matter? Well, if it's dispersonal, it lacks consciousness, will, or self-awareness. Okay, so a dispersonal system cannot will, has no volition to create itself. Why would it create itself? What is the reason for it creating itself? It just happened is what they're going to say, and we'll get into why that falls apart. But I want to acknowledge you have to say it just happened. That you have to. You can't say it willed itself to. But it cannot intend a purpose. There's no teleology. And it cannot, but also it cannot act to cause itself. Okay. So I'll put it this way. I've got a water bottle over there. That water bottle will not, this water bottle will not come over to me. It can't will itself to come over to me. It can't intend a purpose to come over to me, and it cannot act within itself to come over to me. I have to grab it. It has to be moved by another force. But this water bottle will not just magically come over to me. Now, if there's a bug, which is not a very smart thing, right? But it can, as a result, act. It can move. It can have a purpose to feed itself to come over to me if it wants my blood, like a mosquito or something. And it can cause itself to move. But a dispersonal, non-living system, like that water bottle, is not alive. It cannot will itself over to me. It cannot intend for itself to come over to me, and it cannot cause itself to come over to me. So there will be no action. So there's a causal problem that exists in all of this, and that's to bring itself into being, a system must act before it exists. This implies effect before cause, which violates the law of non-contradiction. It cannot both exist and not exist. It can't exist in a way to bring itself into existence if it doesn't exist. That is a logical principle of the law of non-contradiction. There's also the principle of causality. Non-being cannot cause being. It breaks down on the causal time frame, or even just the causal state of being, because we're going to get to the argument of, well, time began in the singularity. We're going to get to that. So for you in the comments, you're like, well, but don't worry, we're going to get there. I've got to lay it all out, okay? A dispersonal, non-rational system cannot initiate its own existence without committing a logical contradiction. So to go back to the premise here, atheists resist logic. This is what I'm talking about. You have to commit a logical crime to get to where we need to go in their worldview, in their system. So what I'm really saying is when atheists resist logic, atheists object to logical metaphysical principles, the law of causality, law of non-contradiction, and metaphysical ontology, epistemology, teleology, but they're going to make claims while they resist it that are teleological claims, that are epistemological claims, ontological claims. They're going to make those claims while rejecting the metaphysics as a principle. So I teed it up. Here it is. Time began at the singularity. The objection that an atheist might raise, and I've heard raised, is time began at the singularity, at the Big Bang. So causality doesn't apply. There was no before for a cause to act in. They say time didn't exist, so it doesn't violate the principle of causality. However, here's my response to that, and it's a logical claim. Even if time begins at the singularity, existence still begins. It's an ontological claim, not a temporal one. It's not based in time, it's based in being. You still have being arising from non-being, which is metaphysically incoherent. Reframing the Kalam cosmological argument, it's a popular argument, but let's reframe it to acknowledge that even if time began at the singularity, whatever begins to exist has an explanation, not necessarily a temporal cause. The universe began to exist since it is not eternal. Therefore, the universe has an explanation. This doesn't require time before time. It simply requires that contingent being must be explained by something necessary. Saying causality doesn't apply because time didn't exist doesn't remove the need for an explanation. It just avoids it. This move is functionally equivalent to saying it just happened, don't ask why. And that's not logic, that's faith in randomness. Did we have this? Well, it just kind of happened. How did it happen? Randomly. It just happened. Abiogenesis. It just happened. It's all random, not purposeful. And that's a faith in randomness. And the reason why it's a faith in randomness is because that's not how mathematics works. You don't just throw more chaos at the wall and get order. You get entropy. Now, we'll get into more of those arguments in a moment. But there's a limitation on materialistic naturalism that I want to address. There's a limitation. So I'm not throwing out materialistic naturalism. I'm highlighting its shortcomings. And here's the limitation. Here's where I'm both going to honor it and rightfully put it in its place. Okay. So here's the limitation on materialistic naturalism. Is there a way I can put this? I'll put me here. There we go. Materialistic naturalism is a useful method. It's a useful method for investigating measurable phenomena within space-time. Okay? We want the concepts of materialistic naturalism because they make experiments rational, reasonable, and controllable. So materialistic naturalism is a useful method for investigating measurable phenomena within space-time, but its scope is inherently limited. It cannot, even in principle, address the foundational metaphysical questions, such as the origin of existence, the nature of consciousness, or the basis of meaning and value. Therefore, it cannot serve as a comprehensive worldview. It was not designed to answer those questions. We are here. Why are we here? Science cannot answer why we are here. And anytime you try to make an answer as to why we are, an ontological claim, you have stepped outside of the realm of materialistic naturalism. You have stepped outside of the realm of the physical world, and you've stepped into a philosophical one. That is a truth claim, a being claim, a purpose claim. And so I'm not here to say that we don't want that. If you're going to measure how clouds work and gravity and all and the black holes and all of this, you need to consider the physicality and just look at it within its physicality to understand certain things. We can understand the water cycle without going, well, Poseidon is there carrying the water molecules around. So we need materialistic naturalism, but it needs to know its place. It should be used for scientific claims, not philosophical ones, and that's going to be a crime committed by atheistic materialistic naturalists. Okay, so to break this down, it's a method, not a metaphysic. It helps study what is, but not why is. It works well for analyzing process, but not purpose. Here's the scope of materialistic naturalism. It can address measurable phenomena, empirical cause and effect, natural processes and mechanisms. It's useful for that. It should be used for that. It should not be rejected. I am not an enemy of science. I am a champion of science. However, it cannot address the origin of existence, ontology, because you can't weigh it, you can't measure it, and you can't repeat it. We can't put the Big Bang in a beaker and run it 15 times and see what happens. That's not how that works. And so we step very reasonably, very purposefully outside of science, outside of physics, and into metaphysics, the origin of existence, ontology, the foundation of consciousness, epistemology, and the basis of value and meaning, teleology. So now we're going to get back into the objections now that we've kind of began with the time one, and then we've addressed the time claim. I felt that was really important because that kind of shuts down the argument. Well, you're just wrong from your premise. I had to show my premise is still very logical. In fact, my premise is obedient to the rules of logic, whereas to reject it, you have to reject logic. So now let's get back to atheists object logical, metaphysical principles. Let's continue. Now, here's what they're going to do. They're going to lean on future hope. Okay, so they're going to say, where's my mouse? There it is. They're going to say, we don't know everything yet, but maybe someday science will solve it. Okay, they're going to say, we don't know yet, but but there's no reason to jump to conclusions. We just don't know yet. I abstain from saying I know. I've heard Neil deGrasse Tyson make this claim. It's an interesting claim. It comes across very respectable, I should say. Not so much respectful, but respectable. But this is a form of faith, not in any metaphysical principle or necessity, but in the ongoing promise of human inquiry. You're saying we don't know, but I have faith, I have hope, a future hope that one day we will know. And what that means is you're not working with knowledge available to you. You're having faith in knowledge you do not possess. you're welcoming that progress, that knowledge far off as someone who believes in it. This is how the Bible also describes faith. We welcome heaven as far off as people who believe in it. You are also having a faith. We don't know yet, but someday we will. I have faith on the ongoing progress of human inquiry. So that's okay, but it's worth noting out. That is a faith that you have. Yet when we critically assess that hope, so now let's look at the hope of that faith. What is the likelihood that we will know someday? Because they say the science is unfolding real time. We're learning rapidly. And that's true in a lot of ways. But we can also assess what can be known within your materialistically natural framework. So yet when we critically assess that hope within their own framework, the odds are vanishingly slim. Explaining why there's something rather than nothing is not just another empirical puzzle, it's a foundational metaphysical problem that may well require a miracle, a principle or cause outside the scope of physical explanation. I qualified miracle there, so you don't just get to invent your own definition. There might be a million definitions of miracle, so keep in mind what Bryce is saying is that right there, a principle of cause outside the scope of physical explanation, okay? I have a whole video on miracles if you really want to hold my feet to the fire on what I believe miracles are. There's a whole video on it. I talk way too much. So go review the video and pick a fight with me over there. However, to say one day we will know how the Big Bang began, well, scientifically, logically, we can't see that. So you have to believe that some sort of miraculous discovery will be made that will allow us to perceive through space-time. And so that is a miraculous faith-based claim. And you're free to do it. I have my own miraculous faith-based claims, but it's worth pointing out with intellectual honesty that you are not making a scientific claim. That is a religious claim. It's not a scientific hypothesis, because what you could say, scientifically, you could say, scientifically, this is my hypothesis, but you're hypothesizing about metaphysics, which means it's a flawed hypothesis according to scientific principle. So the hope for science claim is really a last-ditch, almost desperate appeal. And it's not so different from other kinds of faith. That's what I've been pointing out. Just dressed up in the language of progress and prediction. Materialism is like standing in a locked room, hoping someone will invent a key from the inside while denying the possibility that anyone outside the room exists. It just doesn't flow. You're committing logical fallacy after logical fallacy. You are rejecting metaphysical principle. You're rejecting logic. Now, here's a really interesting piece that I want to point out. I've talked about my religion, but in the argument that I put here, there is no God. I have not said you need God. I haven't introduced God aside from my own like little commentary on the side. But if you just follow my little program here, everything I've written, we have not introduced God whatsoever. And here we're going to get to a red herring and a straw man and a dishonest debate tactic that I think a lot of atheists are not aware of. They do this as a defense mechanism to shut down. This is avoidant behavior, to lean more on my side of education for psychology. But I think this is a psychological defense, and it's quite natural within humans. They conflate metaphysics with the God of the gaps. You see, when presented with metaphysical logical necessities, that's what we've been talking about: ontology, teleology, epistemology. We've been talking about logical, metaphysical necessities. Atheists will often attempt to escape these logical pitfalls, these corners of logic that they've painted themselves in, while claiming logical authority. So they're about to be illogical, or they've made an illogical claim, and then they're going to defend themselves and say that they are the champions of logic without any religion being introduced into the argument. No mention of God, Christianity, or religion. The materialistic naturalist will suddenly invoke God as their objection. Okay, and we're going to see this in the comment section. They've already done it, so we're just breaking down what I saw in the comment section and what's been the experience really my whole life. And this is prevalent in William Lane Craig versus Christopher Hitchens. Like they're all over the place. We're not talking about religion. We are discussing metaphysical necessities, logic, being, causality. I've not brought up God. I've not invoked God into the argument. These are pre-religious, philosophical principles, not appeals to a deity. Okay, so I'm not saying you must believe in God. I'm saying these are metaphysical, logical necessities. Leave God out of it. Instead of engaging with the mathematical, logical problem, they will reject logic and claim God cannot be allowed into the conversation. When clarified that we haven't even invoked God, they will keep God in the conversation as the only logical conclusion. So instead of answering the question, well, okay, here's where your worldview falls apart. How do you answer it? Well, not God. Oh, okay, then how? Not God, you Christian theists, you foolish, illogical people, where we have all the knowledge and logic. Well, okay, if you have all the knowledge and logical authority, then how do you obey these metaphysical principles within your own framework? Well, not God. And so they're going to keep God in the conversation as a straw man, the God of gaps, as a red herring to not have to answer the question themselves. Yet reject God as they lean on their future hope, as we discussed. So they're going to say, well, we don't know, but someday we might. I can't answer these problems. But the problem is, if I say, if someone doesn't know algebra, and I say, and I ask them an algebraic equation, and they're going to say, well, I haven't found the math yet. Well, the math exists. You may not have the answer. You may not have worked out the problem, but you can follow the logical, mathematical conclusion to where it goes. And this is a mathematical, I say mathematical most likely incorrectly. I'm using what is logical principle. If you follow the logic, there are rules you have to obey logically that they violate. And when we say, well, how do you get around this rules violation? They say, well, your God doesn't do it. And actually, he does, but we're not here yet. I'm not invoking God yet, but we're going to get to that. Okay. I'm not going to leave you wanting, but I do want to point out that for the atheist, for the metaphysical, or for the materialistic naturalist atheist, you don't answer this. You abandon reason, you ignore logic, and then you shake your fist at the God of the gaps, who no one has even talked about yet. And when we say, well, forget about God of the gaps, stop being a theist, forget about God, be an atheist, stay in your lane. Atheistically, how do you answer this? You got to say, well, I hope someday humanity will get there. And well, how? Well, maybe perceiving through space-time. You can't, if you say that science is all there is and there's no metaphysics, right? Then you have to come up with a scientific answer. And science can't answer what cannot be weighed, seen, or measured. Okay. So, and here's where we get. So then I'm going to start quoting. So now they haven't made any claims. They've just said, not your God. Okay, well, how do you answer it? I'm not going to answer. So then we go to who has answered. Well, let's go to people with PhDs. Let's go to Nobel Prize winning evolutionary biologists. Let's go to people who hold credentials. And since you won't make an argument, let me appeal to someone who's on your team in making a logical claim, because maybe then I can hold them to that. And then we run into the no true Scotsman fallacy. That's not what real materialists believe. Well, he doesn't speak for all of us. Well, he's just one scientist. Okay, then name a scientist you do agree with. Give me a quote that I can work with. Who do you agree with? I'm not going to tell you. You don't deserve to know. I'm tired of arguing with theists. Well, you haven't made a single claim. You haven't entered the conversation intellectually at all. You've abandoned it. You've shaken your fist at it, and you've tried to come into a place of religion and spread your own religion. You've tried to proselytize. You've tried to make converts without providing any logic, any reason, or any science that we can follow. So why this is a fallacy? This is a classic no true Scotsman reasoning. It goes like this. No Scotsman puts sugar on his porridge, but Angus is a Scotsman, and he puts sugar on his porridge. Well, no true Scotsman would do that. Angus is a Scotsman, he does it. Well, he's not really a Scotsman. Well, here's something a materialistic naturalist has said. Well, we would never say that. Well, but he said it. Well, he's not really one of us. He doesn't speak for us. He's not the Lorax of the atheists. It shifts goalposts by redefining the problem, by redefining the group mid-argument to avoid admitting contradiction. In the rejection of the quote from an authoritative source, they will not make any claim or definition of their own. This will leave their stance ephemeral. You can't that's a vapor. You can't say, well, what do you believe in? I don't know. You're never going to catch me, you theist. It's mysterious, and it's unable to be engaged with, usually attempting to escape the debate with an accusation against the theologian. Well, I'm tired of you theists. I'm tired of your God of the gaps. Well, what do you believe? Tell me. Well, not what that guy said. Okay, then what do you believe? I'm done. I'm lazy. I'm not going to do it. You care more than I care. I'm out. It's intellectually dishonest. It's arguing in bad faith, and it's not even for claiming the logical high road, the reasonable high road. It doesn't have any logic or reason built into it. You haven't even made a claim. You've just shaken your fist at the math, and then blamed Christians for shaking their faith at the math, or their fist at the math. I don't like this equation. Oh, okay, you Christians, you're denying it. Well, where do you go logically? Like, where do you live logically, rationally, realistically? What's your argument? Not what that guy said. Then what is it? You'll never know. In practice, they reject popular materialists like Lewontin for being too honest. They won't define what they believe, yet claim you're misrepresenting them. Then they exit the argument with accusations. You're just another theist with an agenda. Here's why it matters. You can't engage with a moving target. If they reject their own authorities, yet you can't engage with a moving target if they reject their own authorities yet refuse to define themselves. They are debating in bad faith. Make a definition. Make a claim. Say something. They won't. So they're going to conflate science, this is the next big sin, with scientism and empiricism. This one's very, very common. So they conflate science with scientism and empiricism, which are philosophical beliefs. Science is the systematic study of the structure and behavior of the physical and natural world through observation, experimentation, and the testing of theories against evidence obtained. That's science. Now here's scientism, the belief that scientific knowledge, particularly that derived from the hard sciences, is the only valid knowledge or the most reliable source of truth. And that's a truth claim. That's not a scientific claim. And that's more, I believe, newer. Originally, it was more, or historically, it was more rooted in empiricism. The theory that all knowledge is derived from sense experience, stimulated by the rise of experimental science. It developed in the 17th and 18th centuries, expounded in particular by John Locke, George Berkeley, and David Hume. As we've gotten more into multiversal theories, into quantum physics, we've started to get away from anything you can see, touch, and feel as we talk about dark matter, as we talk about just the negative space in the galaxy that we're trying to wrestle with. And we're moving more to scientism, but they're closely synonymous. And I think because most atheists I debate with are unaware of scientism and empiricism, they just call it all science. They don't know when they're switching between the two, and usually not on purpose, but I believe they will switch to whatever best fits their argument or claim or objection. But it's important to note that you're not making scientific claims when you do this. You're making philosophical claims rooted in scientism and empiricism. So a little bit more on this. These are metaphysical and epistemological claims. It becomes self-refuting to make epistemological claims while denying epistemology as a valid source of reasoning. So you say the only thing we can weigh, test, and measure is science. Well, that's an epistemological claim that you can't weigh, test, or measure. It's self-refuting. Only a Sith deals in absolutes. Obi-Wan said absolutely. So scientism, the focus of scientism, is the belief that scientific knowledge, particularly that derived from the hard scientists, is the only valid knowledge or the most reliable source of truth. Its core belief is that science, with its emphasis on empirical evidence and the scientific method, is the best or only way to understand the world and reality. The potential problems with this, though, or critics argue that scientism can be overly narrow, neglecting other valuable sources of knowledge like philosophy, art, and humanities. The distinction from science, it's important to distinguish scientism from the practice of science itself. Science is a tool for inquiry and understanding, a valid tool, an important tool, while scientism is a philosophical position about the nature of knowledge, what we gain from the experiments. So it's important to know, and a lot of atheists just cannot accept this. They don't understand because they're so just blinded, they're so religious, they're so devout to their scientism and their empiricism. So this is on empiricism. Empiricism focuses on sensory experience and observation as the primary source of knowledge. The core belief here is that knowledge is built through experience, specifically through what we perceive through our senses, sight, hearing, touch. It's influenced the development of the scientific method and the pursuit of knowledge through observation and experimentation, which has been good. That's been a good thing of it. I won't reject the philosophical principle that's built it, but we can now see where the philosophy leads. And so, to make a popular argument for people who say we have outgrown religion, we definitely have outgrown empiricism as a philosophy and a religion, though it had its day and it had its use. Learning to speak through observation, using the senses to predict weather, or solving problems through trial and error, all valid uses, often contrasted with rationalism, which argues that reason can be a primary source of knowledge. So you have to make reasonable claims that are rational, right? And so if you are only based in empiricism, then you can't really make a rational claim through empiricism, because it's going to deny that rationality, coming to a rational decision about what to do with knowledge. There's no place for rationalism. It all has to be hard science. And so that's why these truth claims that they make are self-refuting. They don't stand on their own. And so let's put this all together. And we're going to take a look at the comment section. So we're going to go through some of these. Now, I'm not going to go through the whole, some like we went back and forth, but they're all on the other video. You can go read them all. But I'm going to get to some examples. This is going to be everyone who commented was represented. The only one who's not represented is someone who said that they were going to make a follow-up video, and they didn't really make any claims. They said I misrepresented the atheist, but they're going to make a follow-up claim. But he was very kind in his approach. I really respected his tone. He had a lot of respect for him. That's not to demonize him. He's not mentioned here because I'm waiting for his response video, and I can't wait. It's going to be great. So Rusty254, welcome to the video. I was listening intently. The bullet points are going to be my responses. Anything not bullet pointed is what they said. I was listening intently until you started talking about abiogenesis being unproven. I think you need to go read up on the latest papers. They have what I would consider to be enough evidence for it to be true. At the very least, it has more valid, testable evidence than Christianity has given me, testability being key. So here's the responses here. This is scientism, and this is a scientism and empiricism claim. For a view to be valid, it has to be testable. That is a worldview claim, not a scientific standard. So he said, hey, for me to value your knowledge, I have to be able to test your knowledge. And so he's making a claim on knowledge. But he's not. But that's a claim on knowledge, not a scientific claim, and so that's a worldview he's presented here. So for me to value a worldview, I have to be able to test it. This also appeals to future hope. It's true enough while still being unproven. This is a claim made on their belief, their faith. In short, the evidence doesn't prove it to be true, so it hasn't been proven. But for him, it's true enough. They've proven it enough, and that's a subjective claim. They haven't said it's a thing. We've proved it. We know it. It's a fact. So he's having faith in where the data is leading or where it's led so far. But they choose to go with in lieu of the required evidence. So what's the justification? How much evidence does he need? How much do I need? Why is this a standard that I should use? Philosophically, he's falling apart. And now he's going to refute. Well, here we go. So I'd rather go for the one with more evidence. I agree with your point of whatever was before the Big Bang might be a deity, but there definitely isn't enough evidence proving it's a Christian one. So I really respect the honesty in that statement. It leaves room for a metaphysical answer outside of materialistic naturalism. However, the comment still shows a logical inconsistency. They want empirical evidence for what is by necessity unable to be seen, weighed, tested, and measured. If in the same breath he acknowledges that there might be something metaphysical, but then also requires physical proof. Hey, before all that, there might be something metaphysical, but I want physical proof of the metaphysical. And so that doesn't work. You can't fit the Big Bang into a beaker. The Bible has parts. So here's he says the Bible has parts where God/Jesus says, "Test me in this," and I have. Unfortunately, they failed. Well, this last claim begs further clarifications, but it doesn't provide ground for verification. What have they tested? What metrics did they use? I left a long reply asking for clarification and praising their intellectual honesty, even pinned the comment as the top comment on the video, but no follow-up reply was given. In short, they disagree with me. They cannot tell me why, but I should just take their word on faith. This is someone trying to convert me to their religion. They're trying to proselytize. They've shaken their fist at one religion and presented their own religion, their own personal belief, personal stories. And who would I be as a Christian to say, I've tasted and seen that Jesus is good. You should just follow him, take my word for it. Yet I make these apologetic videos. I make metaphysical videos. I make logical videos. I reason my faith within rationality according to the rules of logic. But he has not done done that here. He said, it's good enough for me. It's fine that it's good enough for me. And and he's here in the comments to take down what is essentially, I talked about metaphysics. I talked about abiogenesis. I talked about textual criticism. As I talked about all this, he says, well, I don't know what to say about that, but I believe this way and you should believe it too. So I'm sorry, but if you knocked on my door and told me that my religion was wrong, my beliefs are wrong, my rationality is wrong, you've got to give me a good reason to believe what you're saying. And you haven't. All I got was a trust me, bro. Here's Linguini Sticks. Welcome to the video. You say you aren't going to bully atheists, then immediately are hesitant to fully apply the label to your friend because of his wisdom and morality? That seems wild. I typed out a lot, but deleted it. So he's talking about, I have a best friend who is an atheist. And I said, I hesitated to call him an atheist because he's deeply spiritual. And then I talked about his wisdom and morality, but he's conflated with me saying he's spiritual with me saying he's moral and wise. We've had conversations over a glass of whiskey for hours long. We've talked about love, life, relationships. He was the best man at my according to my new marriage, so I got remarried after a pretty bad divorce. He took me in. He loved me. He let me crash in his room for free, gave me a good deal on rent when I could afford to pay. I love him. But because I love him and because he's awesome, doesn't mean he can't be an atheist. We've had existential conversations, and so I was just hesitant to paint him in a corner as a materialistic naturalist when it seems that he also has a sense of metaphysical reasoning with him. He's never claimed to be an atheist or a metaphysical or a materialistic naturalist. So anyways, but what he gave me here was an appeal to emotion. He didn't raise any objections, right? This Linguini Sticks. I've heard all these arguments before, and they failed to convince me then. Not an accusation of anything you say yourself that these aren't new, which I said in the last video, these aren't new. I said, I've just never seen a video present them all together. And in my book, I laid them all out as I've attempted to steelman materialistic naturalism. And as I steelmanned it, I found issues with the steel. Okay. And that's where I was really saying, not that my comments are new, but I presented them all, what I hope is a coherent, quick, easy to read way that's also logically rich in depth and rational. I think you're committing an error in assigning more to materialism than there is. Well, hopefully this video can help because I've been very specific in my language and I don't see where I could really be wrong in any of this. And I think if anyone disagrees, they wouldn't disagree with me at that point. They would be disagreeing with what is a very basic definition of materialistic naturalism. So he doesn't give me a clarification. It's just a hand wave dismissal. There's nothing for me to really go there. Again, I've got another religious zealot here wanting me to join his religion. I guess the thing that sticks out to me most is how atrocious that Richard Lewontin quote is. It's wild you found a biologist named Richard that seems more insufferable than Dawkins. It's borderline offensive to me that you take a quote from some guy I've never heard of to say that materialism is dogmatic. Well, the guy's an award-winning, Nobel Peace Prize-winning evolutionary biologist. And just because you haven't heard of him, do I have to check with you for all my sources? If I quote Dawkins, is that bad? If I quote Christopher Hitchens, is that bad? Can you give me a list of your personally approved atheists? It doesn't work. So this is an appeal to emotion. No real objection is raised other than he didn't like the source. I mean, it's offensive. This is the no true Scotsman fallacy. Lewontin and Dawkins aren't true atheists. Who is? I'll never know. We'll never know. The other thing that bothers me is how you seem to want to divorce science and philosophy. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but they're incredibly intertwined. And actually here he agrees with my whole premise. Materialistic naturalists reject metaphysics and philosophy while making metaphysical and philosophical claims. And he ends with also the claim that DNA is the most advanced storage system, question mark, question mark, question mark. Gonna need a source on that. Okay, I supplied the sources in my reply. You can go read it for yourself. At this point, he admitted to not actually being engaged. He called himself lazy and he exited the debate. So he's like, you obviously care more about this than I do, and left it at that. So thank you for your reply, but you didn't add anything to the conversation. You showed up and you tried to convert me to your religion or shake your fist at my religion in favor of your own, but didn't give me any good reason why I should believe you or clarification or hey, don't read Lewontin, go read, someone else. Well, who? I don't know. You won't tell me. It's ephemeral. So he'll just hide in the shadows. And so then we have the Howling Joker. This is the issue. This is really good. The moment you don't like what science has to say, it stops being science and you begin to compare it to your own religion. This is projection at its finest. Amen, brother. Preach it. You need to hear this. So he's conflating scientism and empiricism with science. I never rejected any scientific claim. At no point did I say I don't like science. I said that a scientific principle that they're working on hasn't been proven yet. And scientifically, it hasn't been proven yet. So I did not ignore science. If anything, you guys are taking something that has not been proven scientifically and it's saying that you choose to believe it. And that is a scientism and empiricism claim. And you're angry that I don't agree with your religion because I choose to agree with science, which is science says it's not proven. Therefore, it is not proven. Big Bang cosmology is incredibly well supported, as are all theories. You don't get to discredit it just because you like to use the particular area of ignorance and place as a place to hide God. Just because we can't yet investigate before the singularity doesn't mean you get to slip God in there. You need to demonstrate your claim to even be worth considering. Again, he's conflating metaphysics with God of the gaps. I presented metaphysics. He says, well, the only answer I can come up with for metaphysics is God, but I don't like that answer. So I'm going to blame you for my conclusion. It doesn't work. It's for the same reason you get upset when they refuse to presuppose a deity or the supernatural. It's because those things have never been demonstrated and have absolutely zero explanatory power. Well, the law of causality is supernatural. It's outside the natural. The law of non-contradiction is supernatural. It's outside the physical. And so here he conflates, again, scientism and empiricism with science. Metaphysical claims are by definition supernatural, and that they go beyond our observable universe. He wants to make metaphysical claims, yet claim they are physical. This is self-refuting, so he's not obeying logic or ration. Well, God did it, or it's a miracle, are not explanations. Ignorance isn't an argument for God, and the lack of alternate explanations doesn't make your claim of God any more true, and your cursing God doesn't make your lack of explanations any more true. So I'm not trying to slip God in. I'm asking you, how do you answer these metaphysical claims? And what I'm doing is I'm not presenting Christianity, though I will later, as is my want to, because that's where I see it going. But as for now, at this point in the argument, I'm not invoking God. You are. And so you need to demonstrate your position and support your claims. So he makes some pretty radical claims about the limitations on truth and knowledge, but then puts the onus on me for his claims. So he slips empiricism and scientism into the place of science, and then he demands that my religion needs to have physical evidence, but he doesn't, because he can't have physical evidence for his empiricism or scientism claims. But I will demonstrate at the end of the video how actually I succeed where he fails. We'll get to that at the end. Stay tuned. We're almost done too. Abiogenesis is incredibly well supported, and many of the incremental stages from basic chemicals to things like RNA are known. In many cases, there are many naturalistic pathways to the same result. Yes, abiogenesis is complicated. No, it isn't how you described it. Well, here's the thing. I described what abiogenesis is in process, which is life from non-life. It's abiogenesis. So I never described abiogenesis other than supplying its definition, life from non-life. The evidence of my claim is in the etymology of the word itself, life from non-life, and it's not proven. It's not been seen. It cannot be repeated by science. This is a religious appeal to future hope. Hey, we haven't answered it yet, but it's answered enough for me. So I have hope in science. I believe in where this is going, and you should believe what I believe. And I have to justify his belief for his religion. I'm not here to justify his religion, but I can point out the flaws in it. So no, I can't justify your religion. In fact, I can unjustify it. I think you're violating logic. But at the end of the video, I will also justify mine. So here we get to Trach M118. Both of these conversations, I'm also going to deal with only letters and numbers 0 to 9. They were within the same comment. Trach started it. Only letters and numbers 0 to 9 came in halfway through, so we'll get into how that intersects. Trach M118, no, science doesn't start with a conclusion that there can't be a deity. If you want to claim that a deity exists, though, you need evidence to show that such a thing exists. Again, evidence for something, he wants physical evidence for something metaphysical. You need physical evidence for the law of causality. You need physical evidence for the law of non-contradiction. You need physical evidence for ontology, teleology. It just doesn't work. So he's making kind of crazy claims. and then holding himself not to be crazy but rational, while also denying the study of rationalism, choosing empiricism. This conflates science with scientism and empiricism. He makes an epistemological claim that anything that can be known must be able to be seen, observed, and measured. This isn't science, it's philosophy in a lab coat. The problem is that some people want to insert their deity or some deity with no need to present actual, objectively verifiable evidence. This is self-refuting. He makes an objective philosophical claim that cannot be objectively verified with evidence. So he wants something metaphysical to be true. He wants certain aspects of the metaphysical nature of cosmology, the causality, all of that to be true, but he can't prove it. And then he wants other people to prove that they're wrong, or prove that they're right, while not needing any evidence to prove that he's wrong or right. So he's self-refuting, because I don't make the claim that you need to prove there isn't a God. I just say, well, logically, here's what happens if the universe is rational. But he doesn't make any claim other than himself, and says that I need to then justify his claims on epistemology. This is a problem if you're going to hold to the scientific method. Well, I do hold to the scientific method, but I hold it in its place, and you don't. You've turned the scientific method into a philosophy. Let's continue. That is a problem if you're going to hold to the scientific method. The issue here is that there are people who want to bypass the need for evidence so that they can insert their religion. But that's what you've done. You've inserted your religion in place of the scientific method by turning the scientific method into a religion, which literally inserts religion into the scientific method. Once again, this conflates science with scientism and empiricism. It's self-refuting, illogical, and it's a religious worldview held on a philosophical premise. He believes, philosophically, religiously strict, that science is the only way to know anything that we know. The scientific method, according to materialistic naturalism. Well, that's a religion. That's a metaphysical claim on epistemology, on ontology, on teleology, and it cannot back itself up. So it all falls apart. He continues, though, because he read my objections and he responded back. And all my objections are basically what I said there, but you can go read them if you want. I care very little about what worldview makes the most sense. That's true. You've shown that. I care about what we have objectively verifiable evidence for. He'll make this claim, but then he's immediately going to throw it out. Watch this. There are plenty of things that make sense to me that are not true based on objective evidence. He just refuted his opening premise. I do care about what we have objectively verifiable evidence for, but there are things that make sense to him that are not true based on objective evidence. So what is it? How am I supposed to follow the logic here? Scientists do not have to start by assuming there's no God. However, if you want to claim that there is one, you need evidence to back up that claim. You need a falsifiable prediction that your hypothesis makes so that your hypothesis is testable. Now, I think he's trying to throw in some big words here, and I'm guilty of using big words here and now because I have to be very specific, but he conflates science with scientism and empiricism. He makes an epistemological claim that anything that can be known must be able to be seen, observed, and measured. This isn't science. This is philosophy in a lab coat. So, dark matter. We can get to other natures of the universe. Even quantum physics is where we have to go now to make metaphysical claims, which I think are very valuable. To understand why a black hole might actually be a black mirror, you can't use science for that. It can touch the sciences, but then we start getting into metaphysical, mathematical equations, quantum stuff. If you want to go with whatever worldview you think makes sense, whether it has evidence or is true, you can do that, but don't call it science. Yep. And you can do that, but you're calling it science, and I haven't. I haven't called religion science, but you called your religion science, and that's really your problem. And don't try to put it in schools. Now, I never made the claim that we should put religion in schools. I never talked about that. Unfortunately, Christians always want to put their religion in the public school system. Just look at Texas. So here he both defines his own sin and then commits it. Right? So he committed the very sin that he's accusing me of. He wants his philosophy of empiricism and scientism to be taught in schools as science. That's what he wants. Yet he rejects any other philosophy being taught in school, even when it's just taught as philosophy and not science. So if I said, well, could we teach religion as a philosophy, as a moral system, as we've done with the Western civilization experiment? No, you can't do that. Why? Because your scientism and empiricism are the only philosophy allowed in the school system. Ultimately, he leaves no room for logical metaphysics while making illogical metaphysical demands that he himself fails to upload. What we see in this comment is just a lot of hypocrisy. And so from here, Drake, M118 goes in circles, continuing to conflate his philosophy with science and spirals into venting about religion in schools where I never once made that claim or took that cause up in my video. He compares Christians to Hitler, he invokes images of child sacrifice, and ties in a million other religions into the conversation, all to avoid defining his own. To avoid trying to break down what he essentially, to avoid breaking down what is essentially a fever dream of political venting, you are welcome to go read our back and forth for yourself. But to sum it all up, it's just religious intolerance while spouting his own religion and never addressing the metaphysical claims. He conflates the God of the gaps for logical metaphysics. So when I say, what do you do with logical metaphysics? He says, I have no place for your God of the gaps. Well, we're not talking about the God of the gaps. We're asking you to answer logical, rational, metaphysical claims, and you can't do that. And yet you call it the God of the gaps. And so lastly, we'll get into, I think this is the last one. Only letters and numbers 0 to 9. I mistyped his name, but only letters and numbers 0 to 9. He says that, and he jumps in the middle of me talking to M118. Drake M118. That is not how the one true Scotsman fallacy works. Okay. I'm not saying he's not a scientist. This is about Richard Lewontin quote. And I said, well, then if you're denying that, then who do you believe in? Because I'm saying that all of his views are not shared among all scientists. So all scientists have to agree to cite a source. Then in that case, you cannot cite any scripture that Christians might debate or disagree on. It just doesn't work. Not to mention different schools of science or beliefs in science. On scientific claims when we get into metaphysics and quantum reasoning. So what you're doing is grabbing one Scotsman and saying all Scotsmen are like this one, which is just plain misguided. So he rejects Richard Lewontin, but he doesn't clarify his stance. He only hides the ball and claims moral and intellectual superiority. So again, he doesn't define who he believes in, what I should do. He just says, you didn't get who I was. Well, who are you? We'll never know. In summary, him and I, we go back and forth for a bit. You can go read it. I actually really like and enjoyed the back and forth. It was my birthday when doing this, and I was like, yay, more comments. This is fun. The core takeaway, though, is that only letters and numbers 0 to 9. He will, if you go read all the comments between him and me, he will reject any metaphysical logic regarding causality. He adheres to a strict sense of scientism or empiricism. This long debate can be easily summed up from the start of this video. Going back all the way to the beginning of this video, materialistic naturalists reject metaphysical logic and call it the God of the gaps while adhering to self-refuting future hope. So they'll put a limitation on knowledge, yet put a faith and hope in that knowledge, and say that science will one day prove what they also claim to not believe in. So it's circles. Here's my final point, okay? I'm going to pick a fight here. Sorry, but I have to make it. Where materialistic naturalism fails as a worldview, Christianity succeeds, okay? So materialistic naturalism is not a good worldview. It's an incomprehensive, illogical, irrational worldview. We need the philosophy that it invokes here and there for scientific experiments, and that's the only place it should be used. However, Christianity succeeds by definition, and here we're getting into that. So I'm being very careful in my wording. I hummed and hawed over every slide in this video. So if you're going to pick at it, do not straw man it, steel man it, or ask for clarification, which I doubt is going to happen in the comment section. Claim: if materialistic naturalism is followed appropriately, this is my claim, followed appropriately within its methodological scope, which means you keep it where it belongs, it must concede that Christianity is the more logically acceptable worldview. Not because it can prove Christianity's metaphysical claims, but because it cannot sustain its own metaphysical assumptions. And Christianity's claims intersect with observable reality more coherently than the alternative. So I make 2 points here. We're going to break them down and we're going to end the video. Materialistic naturalism makes metaphysical claims, and the metaphysical claims it makes, it cannot sustain. It says things like metaphysics don't exist and then tries to prove it metaphysically. It all falls apart. It's self-refuting. Christianity, however, can succeed because it goes across definitions. So I would never say you should only use the Bible for science. I don't think you should use the Bible as a science book. It's a great moral system. There are things that are true historically within there, but it goes across disciplines. And that's why it can succeed, because it can talk about history, and it can talk about metaphysics, and it can talk about some things that it touches on scientifically without making scientific experimental claims. But materialistic naturalism will make metaphysical claims while denying philosophy, rationality, metaphysics, and it just all falls apart. And so because it can't sustain the weight of its own assumptions, it falls apart, and Christianity doesn't. And because Christianity has observable reality that they can weigh, test, and measure, not all of the religion, but a lot of Christianity goes into observable reality, we can actually weigh, test, and measure. We'll get into that here. The claim: if materialistic naturalism is followed appropriately within its methodological scope, it must concede that Christianity is the more logically acceptable worldview, not because it can prove Christianity's metaphysical claims, but because materialism cannot sustain its own. That's kind of a restate. Why? Materialistic naturalism is self-defeating. It relies on metaphysical principles, on logic, causality, and value that it cannot explain or justify within its own framework. You cannot weigh the logic of it. You can't scientifically experiment the logic, the causality, the values that it places there. You can't do it. Those don't fit in beakers. It demands observable proof, yet depends on unobservable assumptions. The uniformity of nature, logical absolutes, the multiverses, when you get into some of the higher end of it, it just falls apart. And that's why we're going quantum. That's why we're going multiversal, because you can't have a closed system. It doesn't work. Christianity addresses what materialism cannot. What is the origin of being? God is an uncaused cause. That does not violate logic. That does not violate rationality. It does violate scientific principles because it does not fit within the scope of science for its truth claim. So it's like saying something that cannot be weighed, seen, or measured can exist without being testable. That's a statement that you can make logically. Well, it can't be weighed, seen, or measured, so you can't test it, but it does exist. So it's a logical claim. Whether it exists or not, it's a logical claim. Consciousness, personal mind, precedes impersonal matter. Emergence, where does all this come from? Meaning and morality, rooted in divine will, not evolutionary utility. Rational order reflects logos, not chaos. So Christianity intersects with also so that's all metaphysical claims that we can test with a moral system. Materialistic naturalism rejects those claims, yet also strictly adheres to principles that we need to find within them. So it falls apart. Whether you agree with Christianity or not, the point is that as a worldview, it can go where materialistic naturalism cannot ever go. So you can reject Christianity and pick whatever other worldview you want, but materialistic naturalism collapses in upon itself. It can't go there. And then also Christianity does intersect with observable reality. We can weigh testimony, billions across cultures, languages, and centuries. Rejected rabbi with 12 rejected disciples exploded. Why? Well, that's an epistemological claim, but so we can't ask why. That's metaphysics, but we can see how. How did it spread? The roads for Rome were just paved. How was it carried? How did his death on the cross play into things? We can observe throughout history these claims and weigh and measure them. It has coherence. It aligns with logic, causality, and moral intuition. When it comes to the explanation of God, it can obey logic. It can obey the law of causality, whereas materialism cannot. It has a history rooted in real events, not abstract hypotheticals, and the real world transformation. Lives change not by explanation, but by encounter. It can be engaged with. You have drug addicts turning their life around. You have people who are on death row leading revivals. We can see life turned around. And while you can say, well, hold on, we can explain all that, you can't explain it scientifically. You have to then start making metaphysical claims, but you want to observe. We can observe what's happening, but then when you get to the why is it happening, that's where we go more to metaphysics. However, you can observe it, and that's one of the points. We can observe people interacting, engaging, this faith growing, the historical claims. So it's not to say that it's all observable. It intersects with observable reality. So if I said that a volcano exploded 1 million years ago, or thousands of years ago, none of us can see that volcano explode, but we can look through the history books, we can look at the testimony, we can look at the fallout to see that happened. While we cannot repeat the explosion, we cannot test the explosion, we can't recreate the volcanic explosion in that area at that place and time, we can where that claim intersects with observable reality through testimony, through logical coherence, through rationality, we can then go, okay, that's probably true. So I'm not speaking the natural language of materialistic naturalists when I say that, so it can be a little confusing to you guys, because it doesn't necessarily compute. That's not for those who are strictly materialistic naturalists. It's not going to work. However, for those of you who are picking up on what I'm putting down, it's going to be because your brain is not so enslaved to empiricism. Okay, so the conclusion is this: when materialism fails to provide a sufficient foundation for reality, let me move my head up a little bit. When materialism, shorthand for atheists who claim to be closed system materialistic naturalists, okay, when materialism fails to provide a sufficient foundation for reality, Christianity steps in, not as a god of the gaps, but as a coherent explanation for the entire framework itself. It all fits within the system. So if I have a puzzle and I'm trying to fit together this puzzle, how do all the pieces fit together? And I take the puzzle piece of materialistic naturalism, it doesn't fit. It doesn't go in there. With Christianity, when you put it in there, it fits logically, it fits rationally, it fits historically. And so it goes across all the disciplines, whereas like materialistic naturalism is like the puzzle piece where only one piece fits and you're trying to fit it in and shove it where the rest of the gaps go. So long video, but it's my response. And I was very clear and specific. So some people, oh, you talk too much. I'm sorry, but I'm not going to be vague and then receive claims that I've been vague, right? So I've been very specific. I've been very intentional. I put a lot of work, thought, time. I've hummed and hawed. I've tried to steel man the argument as much as possible. So if you're going to say I misunderstand, if you're going to say I'm misquoting, you need to specify or you need to go away. Stop spreading your false religion and proselytizing, but I'll also allow room for that if you are going to make rational claims. Someone comes into my comment section and says, praise Allah, like, right, that's it, praise Allah. Or I've got Jehovah's Witness going, yeah, well, you don't understand, you should be Jehovah's Witness. That's just proselytization. You're just evangelizing. Stop evangelizing. Stop being such a theist. Be rational, be logical. If you have the logical, rational high ground, prove it. Stop invoking the God of the gaps. Stop attacking red herrings. Stop attacking straw men. Stop pretending you don't understand. Engage with logic. I'm not saying you have to be a theist. I'm not saying you have to be a Christian. I'm saying you have to answer these questions. I made a video saying materialistic naturalism does not answer these questions. And what I got in my comments section was a lot of, well, I don't have to. You should believe my religion. How dare you say that we don't answer the questions that I still won't answer? Answer the questions. A little bit of a gauntlet thrown down. If you can answer the questions, answer the questions. If you can't, then I pray that you've got a pebble in your shoe. Why can't you answer it? Wrestle with it. Obsess over it. Take walks on it. Meditate on it. Fume about it. Go study and read books and logic and come back well equipped. Because atheists, you showed up without a single good premise, conclusion, rationality, logic. You've rejected metaphysics. You've rejected rationality. You've rejected logic. I would love to find an opponent among you, but I haven't. So I'm praying that opponent comes up. I feel like Tony Stark calling out the Mandarin. Please come blow up my home, my theological home. You have my address in the comment section, not my actual address. This is all a metaphor. Please don't attack my family. We're just engaging intellectually here. But I hope that some of you have accepted that challenge. I hope some of you will take this serious because I'm honestly disappointed. Honestly, I really hoped that I would find when I saw atheists running to the comments, I was excited. I was like, yes, finally. But William Lane Craig, when asked, who was your toughest debate? William Lane Craig said, atheists are arrogant and they don't prepare for the debate. And not a single one of them has made a good argument. And I wish he was wrong. Stop being arrogant. Prepare for the debate. Read some of these books. Come back at me with facts and logic. Come at me with something I can't answer. Come back with an answer that doesn't violate the law of non-contradiction and causality. Otherwise, appeal to your future hope. We don't know, but someday we will. I admire your faith. And it would take a miracle for you to observe the origin of the universe. So believe in that miracle. It's a wonderful, faithful, religious, miraculous faith that you found within yourself of scientism and empiricism. Otherwise, the theists like me will continue to respect science, appreciate what is given to our culture, and leave it in its lane respectably. Thank you so much, guys. Sorry for the intensity at the end. You have a great one. Bye.